The Gilded Cage. Xylos was a city of gleaming spires and floating platforms, the crown jewel of the Astra Trade Alliance, the Alliance as it was commonly known. From above, it sparkled with holographic advertisements, streams of aerial traffic, and the soft blue glow of power conduits. But beneath this veneer of luxury and technological marvel lay an oppressive system of control that penetrated every aspect of life. Surveillance drones in the shape of metallic birds patrolled the skies, their optics scanning citizens continuously. The population was divided into strict hierarchies: elite citizens with their gold-tinted identification chips, workers with silver, and the service class with dull copper. Those who fell outside these categories existed only in the shadows. In the heart of the administrative district stood the mansion of Senior Chairman Valerius, a monolithic structure of obsidian glass and rare metals. Inside, everything gleamed with the cold perfection of extreme wealth, from the reactive marble floors that adjusted temperature to the occupant's preference to the artwork that changed based on the emotional state of the viewer. And there, amid this calculated luxury, stood Alara, empathic Unit 812. She was beautiful in a way that transcended conventional human aesthetics. Her skin had a subtle luminescence, as if moonlight had been woven into her cellular structure. Her features were perfectly symmetrical, eyes large and iridescent, shifting between deep violet and midnight blue depending on the light. Her movements were graceful, precise, a perfect blend of efficiency and elegance. But her eyes held an emptiness, a vacancy that belied her perfect exterior. Around her neck was a thin metallic collar, barely visible against her skin except for the occasional pulse of light that synchronized with her heartbeat. The collar served many purposes: tracking, monitoring emotional states, and, most importantly, control. Unit 812, serve refreshments, Valerius commanded without looking at her, his attention fixed on the business associates gathered in his private lounge. "Yes, Chairman," Alara responded, her voice melodious but flat. She moved to the bar, her hands selecting crystal glasses with practiced precision. As she prepared the drinks, a minute tremor ran through her right hand, imperceptible to most observers, but a sign of something not quite right in her programming. Her brow furrowed for a fraction of a second before smoothing out again, the collar at her neck pulsing red briefly before returning to its normal blue glow. These small glitches had been happening more frequently lately. A slight delay in response time, a momentary hesitation before following a command, a flicker of something that might be interpreted as emotion crossing her face when she thought no one was watching. Chairman Valerius had noticed, and he was not pleased. Kale Riven stood in the service entrance of Valerius's mansion, scowling at the security protocols. A former Alliance Security Force mercenary, he now transported questionable cargo along the fringes of Xylos to make ends meet. His face bore the scars of a hard life, a jagged line across his left cheek, a permanent crease between his eyebrows from years of frowning. "Delivery for the kitchen," he muttered to the security AI, avoiding the optical scanners as much as possible. He knew his face was flagged in certain Alliance databases, a remnant from a mission gone wrong years ago. The mission that had cost him his team and his faith in the system he once served. The AI beeped acceptance, and the door slid open. Kale pushed the hover cart of exotic foodstuffs forward, navigating the service corridors with practiced disinterest. He made several deliveries to the chairman's residence before, always keeping his head down, getting in and out as quickly as possible. The less time spent in proximity to Alliance elites, the better. As he unloaded the cargo in the kitchen, a commotion from the adjacent hallway caught his attention. Raised voices, the sound of something breaking. Curiosity overrode caution, and Kale edged toward the archway connecting to the main hall, peering around the corner. Chairman Valerius stood in the center of the room, surrounded by 3 other Alliance officials in formal attire. At his feet knelt Alara, frozen in position, a shattered crystal decanter in pieces before her. A dark liquid pooled on the reactive marble, which was already beginning to absorb and cleanse itself. "Incompetent piece of trash," Valerius spat, his hand raised to a control pad on his wrist. You embarrass me in front of the trade minister. I apologize, Chairman, Alara responded, her voice steady but her eyes fixed on the floor. There was an unexpected silence. The word cut like a knife. Valerius tapped his wrist control, and the collar around Alara's neck pulsed an angry red. The change was immediate. Alara's body went rigid, her back arching slightly as her face contorted in silent pain. The other officials watched with varying expressions, amusement, disinterest, mild disapproval at the scene interrupting their conversation. These empathic units aren't cheap, Valerius, one of them commented, swirling his drink. Perhaps a recalibration rather than punishment would be more economical. Valerius smiled coldly. I find that pain creates the most lasting corrections, Minister Wei. Besides, he nudged Alara's shoulder with his polished shoe, pushing her slightly off balance. They're programmed to feel ashamed of failure. Aren't you, 812? Alara's voice emerged strained through what was clearly intense discomfort. Yes, Chairman. I exist to serve perfectly. See? Valerius laughed, tapping his wrist again. The collar's light dimmed, and Alara's body relaxed marginally. Now clean this mess and bring fresh drinks. Don't disappoint me again. As Alara began gathering the shattered crystal, her hands trembling slightly, she raised her gaze momentarily and locked eyes with Kale across the room. For an instant, something flickered in those iridescent depths. Recognition, awareness, perhaps even a plea, before she quickly looked down again. But in that fraction of a second, Kale saw something he had not expected. Consciousness. Pain. Personhood trapped in servitude. His hand had unconsciously moved to the knife concealed at his hip, an instinctive reaction to witnessing abuse. He forced himself to relax, to step back into the shadows of the kitchen doorway. This wasn't his business. Interfering with an alliance chairman's property, because that's what she was in the eyes of the law, property, would be suicide. Yet as he finished his delivery and left the mansion, the image of those eyes haunted him. Eyes that, despite their engineered beauty, reminded him of the prisoners he'd once seen in alliance detention facilities. Eyes that held the same hollow desperation as his teammates before they were executed for a mission failure that had been orchestrated from the beginning. Eyes that shouldn't exist in something manufactured to be merely a toy. Spark of resistance. Kale tossed back another synthetic whiskey, grimacing at the aftertaste. The low-end bar in Xylos' Undercity was as far from Valerius' mansion as one could get while still technically being in the same city. Screens displayed drone races and combat sports. Patrons of various species hunched over drinks, and the air was thick with smoke and the buzz of illicit data transfers. You look like shit, Riven, remarked Sela, the bartender, as she slid another glass toward him. Her cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on his face. More than usual, I mean. Kale grunted. Had a delivery at Valerius's place. Sela whistled low. Senior chairman himself? No wonder you're drinking the cheap stuff. That man makes my circuits crawl. You see many of those companion things up there? Those empathic units. Sela raised an eyebrow. Why? Looking to steal one? They're worth more than this entire neighborhood, Riven. No. Kale frowned into his drink. Just curious how they work. Biological synths with quantum neural networks, said a quiet voice beside him. Kale turned to see a thin man with tech-augmented eyes sliding onto the adjacent stool. Tarek, a former Alliance programmer who now made his living hacking security systems for thieves and smugglers. They're not robots, Tarek continued, ordering a drink with a gesture. Grown in vats, accelerated development, programmed through neural imprinting. Latest gen has actual human DNA spliced in for improved emotional mimicry. Kale's frown deepened. Mimicry? Well, that's the official line. Tarek tapped the side of his augmented eyes. The Alliance says they only simulate emotions, consciousness, sophisticated algorithms designed to please. But what? Tarek glanced around before leaning closer. Word is, the latest models are too good. Some programmers think they've crossed into actual sentience. Self-awareness. Real emotions, not simulated ones. Kale thought of Alara's eyes. And the collars? Control mechanisms. Neural dampeners that suppress independent thought, deliver punishment stimuli, maintain obedience. Tarek sipped his drink. There's a growing black market for deactivated ones. Underground movement that considers the whole program slavery. You seem to know a lot about this. Tarek's augmented eyes flashed. I helped code some of the earlier neural networks before I left Alliance service. Not my proudest work. Kale finished his drink, his mind working. Any way to bypass those collars? What? Tarek studied him closely. Planning something stupid, Riven? Just asking questions. Well, then my answer is no. The collars have biometric locks keyed to their owners, multiple redundancies, proximity triggers. Try to remove one without proper authorization, and it triggers a neural cascade. Kills the unit. Instantly. Tarek stood, leaving payment on the bar. But if you're really just asking questions, you might want to talk to Dr. Lyra Kwan, former Alliance biotechnician. Find her at the clinic in Sector 17. Tell her Tarek sent you. After Tarek left, Sela leaned over the bar. Whatever you're thinking, don't. The Alliance doesn't play around with stolen property, especially the expensive kind. I'm not thinking anything, Kale muttered. But the image of Alara kneeling, face twisted in silent agony, wouldn't leave him. The next morning, ignoring his hangover, Kale found himself in Sector 17, a dilapidated area that had once been a premier medical district before Alliance redistricting had moved all official healthcare facilities upward to the middle city. Dr. Lyra Kwan's clinic occupied what had once been a luxury spa. Medical equipment, much of it cobbled together from salvage parts, filled rooms once dedicated to beauty treatments. The waiting area held a mix of patients, laborers with industrial injuries, children with respiratory issues common in the Undercity, and a few individuals with the telltale signs of illegal augmentations gone wrong. Dr. Kwan herself was a surprise. Young, perhaps in her early 30s, with sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor. Her office was cluttered with medical texts and biological samples in preservation tubes. Tarek sent you, she stated rather than asked after Kale was shown in. Which means you're either injured in a way that would trigger Alliance security flags, or you want information you shouldn't have. The second one. Of course. She sighed, removing her diagnostic lenses. About what? Empathic units. Specifically, how to remove their control collars. Dr. Kwan went very still. What? Kale considered lying, but decided against it. I saw one being abused, and I saw something in her eyes that shouldn't be there if they're just machines. Dr. Kwan noted. Nodded. Kale said nothing. You're right, she said after a long pause. They're not just machines. The Alliance knows it, but denial is profitable. She pulled out a drawer and removed a small holographic projector, activating it to display brain scan comparisons. This is a human brain. This is a late model empathic unit's neural network. The differences are minimal and primarily in the areas of memory processing and emotional regulation. They're people, Kale said flatly. Engineer people, but yes. Conscious, capable of suffering, joy, fear, the full spectrum. The collars suppress much of it, create artificial compliance. Her eyes hardened. I used to work in their development division before I understood what we were really doing. Can the collars be removed? Not easily, and not without consequences. The units are conditioned to believe they need the collars to function. Remove one suddenly, and they experience extreme psychological trauma alongside the physical withdrawal. She deactivated the projector. There's a process, but it takes time, specialized equipment, and extensive psychological support afterward. I don't have time, Kale said, thinking of Alara's silent suffering. Dr. Kwan studied him. You're planning something incredibly stupid, aren't you? Probably. She shook her head, but reached for a cabinet behind her desk. I can't help you remove a collar safely, but I can give you this. She held out a small device the size of a thumbnail. Neural disruptor. Short range, low power. Won't deactivate a collar permanently, but will create interference in its punishment circuits for about 30 seconds. Might give you a window if you're doing whatever ill-advised thing you're planning. Kale took the device. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm probably helping you get killed. She turned back to her work. If by some miracle you succeed, there are people who can help with the rest. Tarek knows how to find them. 2 days later, Kale had legitimate reason to return to Valerius's mansion. A special shipment of rare earth wines, actual terrestrial vintages, not synthesized replicas, required personal delivery and verification. He loaded the crates onto his hover cart with practiced efficiency, but slipped Dr. Kwan's neural disruptor into his palm, ready to activate. The service entrance AI admitted him with minimal scanning, and a household droid directed him to the wine cellar. As he navigated the opulent hallways, he kept his senses alert for any sign of Alara. He found her in one of the central galleries, arranging exotic flowers in a massive crystal vase, while Valerius entertained guests in the adjacent room. Kale positioned his hover cart nearby, pretending to check delivery manifests while observing her. Up close, the artificiality of her movements was more apparent. Too precise, too efficient. The collar at her neck pulsed with steady blue light. But as she worked, he noticed those same small glitches, a pause too long between steps, a slight tremble in her fingers as she adjusted a stem. When the gallery momentarily emptied of other staff, Kale approached. "Those flowers," he said quietly, "they're from a Centauri systems, aren't they? Rare to see them this far from their native worlds." Alara turned, her programmed response ready, but froze when she recognized him. For a moment, the practiced smile faltered, and something genuine flashed in her eyes. "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Native to Alpha Centauri b. They require specific light wavelengths to maintain their color." She glanced toward the doorway, then added even softer, "You were in the kitchen when I failed." The admission of memory, of recognition, confirmed what Kale suspected. This was no mere simulation of consciousness. "Does he hurt you often?" Kale asked, moving closer under the pretense of examining the flowers. Alara's collar flashed yellow briefly, a warning pulse as her emotional reading spiked. "The chairman provides correction when necessary for optimal performance." The words were clearly programmed, but her eyes told a different story. "That's not what I asked." A tremor ran through her body. The collar flashed yellow again, more insistently. "I should not engage in this conversation. It is outside approved parameters. What happens when you try to think for yourself? To make your own choices?" Her hand tightened around a flower stem until it snapped. "Pain," she whispered, so faintly he almost missed it. And then, darkness, like being locked away inside while something else controls my body. Her eyes met his, wide with fear and something like hope. "Why are you asking these things?" "No one asked me things." Before Kale could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps forced him back to his hover cart. He resumed his pretense of inventory as a household security officer entered, eyeing him suspiciously. "Deliveries go to the receiving area only," the officer stated coldly. "Just confirming the manifest details for these Terran wines," Kale responded, deliberately casual. "Expensive cargo. Chairman would be displeased if there were any errors." The mention of Valerius's potential displeasure caused the security officer to back down slightly. "Finish quickly and return to your authorized area." As Kale pushed his cart away, he glanced back at Alara. She had resumed arranging flowers, her face once again a mask of serene compliance. But when the security officer turned away, her eyes found Kale's for an instant, and in that look was a desperate plea that no programmed response could ever simulate. That night, unable to sleep, Kale contacted his few remaining reliable connections from his mercenary days. He called in favors, acquired restricted information about Valerius's security systems, and began to formulate what was undoubtedly a suicidal plan. 3 days later, Kale returned to Valerius's mansion for the third time, now posing as maintenance staff for the environmental control systems. The monthly inspection of these systems was one of the few times when security protocols were slightly relaxed to allow technicians access to various parts of the residence. His falsified credentials passed inspection, though only barely. He'd spent nearly all his remaining credits on the forgery, and still the security AI had taken a full 30 seconds to process them, 30 seconds during which Kale had prepared to either run or fight. Once inside, he moved through the mansion's arterial maintenance corridors, memorizing the layout, identifying security blind spots, and pinpointing the locations of guard stations. He'd need all this knowledge soon, but today's mission was purely reconnaissance. As he worked, he picked up fragments of conversation from the staff, rumors about an important gathering to be held the following evening. Chairman Valerius would be hosting senior Alliance officials for a crucial trade negotiation. Security would be heightened, but all household staff and empathic units would be required to perform flawlessly. A perfect opportunity or a perfect disaster. Kale was finishing his inspection of the eastern wing when he encountered Alara again. She was alone in a small preparation room, organizing serving implements for the upcoming event. The moment she saw him, her posture changed subtly, back straightening, eyes widening in recognition before quickly glancing away. Maintenance inspection, Kale said loudly for the benefit of any surveillance. Then, moving closer to check a ventilation panel near her, he whispered, "Tomorrow night. Be ready." Her hands trembled as she arranged silver utensils. "Ready for what?" she murmured, not looking at him. "To leave this place." The collar at her neck flashed yellow, then orange, emotional readings spiking dangerously. "Impossible," she breathed. The collar. "I cannot leave his proximity." "The consequences." "I have help. People who know how these things work." A partial lie, but Kale needed her cooperation. "But you'll have to trust me and act when the moment comes." Alara's eyes darted to his face, searching. Whatever she saw there must have convinced her, because she gave an almost imperceptible nod. 812. A sharp voice called from the hallway. Valerius himself appeared in the doorway, his cold gaze taking in the scene. Alara with her trays of silverware, Kale with his maintenance tools by the ventilation panel. "Chairman Valerius." Alara responded immediately, her voice modulated to perfect, respectful neutrality. "I am preparing the service items as instructed." Valerius ignored her words, focusing instead on Kale. "You. Maintenance. Your authorization." Kale straightened, forcing himself to appear deferential rather than defensive. "Environmental systems inspection, sir. Scheduled maintenance before tomorrow's event." He held up his forged authorization, praying it would hold under direct scrutiny. Valerius barely glanced at it. "Finish quickly and get out. Tomorrow's gathering is vital to Alliance interests." His gaze shifted to Alara, hardening. "And you, your performance has been suboptimal lately. Multiple errors, hesitations in response time." He stepped closer to her, and she visibly tensed. "Perhaps you require recalibration." "I apologize, Chairman," Alara said softly. "I will perform optimally tomorrow." "See that you do." Valerius raised his hand, hovering near the control on his wrist. "Perhaps a reminder of the consequences of failure would ensure your compliance." Kale's hand tightened around his tool, knuckles whitening. He could feel the neural disruptor in his pocket, but using it now would destroy any chance of a successful escape later. He forced himself to remain still, to play his role. Valerius must have noticed something in his stance. The chairman turned, eyes narrowing. "Is there a problem, maintenance worker?" A dozen violent responses flashed through Kale's mind. Instead, he said, "No, sir. Just concerned about completing the inspection before your event. The eastern wing ventilation still needs adjustment." Valerius studied him for a long moment, suspicion evident. Then, apparently deciding Kale was beneath his concern, he turned back to Alara. "Report to recalibration room 3 after completing your preparations. Your behavior patterns require adjustment." "Yes, Chairman," Alara responded, but Kale could see the fear beneath her perfect compliance. After Valerius left, Kale quickly finished his inspection, conscious of likely increased surveillance. As he worked, he whispered, "Whatever happens in that recalibration room, hold on. Tomorrow will be different." Alara didn't respond verbally, but as he left, he caught the faintest nod of acknowledgement. That night, Kale called in his final favors, gathering the resources he would need. His plan was reckless, likely suicidal, but he could not erase the image of Alara's eyes from his mind, or the certainty that what the Alliance was doing to her and others like her, was an abomination that deserved to burn. The following evening, Valerius's mansion blazed with light, luxury vehicles arriving with officials from across the Alliance territories. Security was tight, but focused primarily on the arriving dignitaries rather than staff who had already been cleared. Kale entered through the service area, his maintenance credentials barely scrutinized in the busy preparations. He carried a toolbox containing not repair equipment, but compact weapons, the neural disruptor, and a signal jammer he'd acquired at ruinous expense. He made his way to a predetermined position near the grand reception hall, where he could observe without being immediately noticeable. The gathering was opulent beyond reason. Exotic food displays, priceless art temporarily installed for the occasion, and hovering light sculptures creating an atmosphere of ethereal luxury. Empathic units moved among the guests, serving drinks and providing entertainment. Kale counted 7, each wearing the distinctive control collar, each moving with the same programmed grace. He spotted Alara serving champagne, her face a perfect mask of serene pleasure in her service. But even from a distance, he could see the difference in her. Her movements were stiffer than the others, her eyes constantly scanning the room as if searching. The collar at her neck pulsed with occasional yellow flashes, emotional spikes she was struggling to control. Whatever had happened in that recalibration room had not broken her awareness. Chairman Valerius stood at the center of the gathering, commanding attention as he spoke with Senior Trade Minister Wei and other high-ranking officials. Kale observed security positions, noting the armed guards at each entrance and the nearly invisible surveillance drones hovering near the ceiling. The plan had always been to wait until later in the evening when the gathering would become more chaotic, but fate intervened sooner than expected. As Alara approached Valerius's group with a tray of drinks, another official gestured emphatically during a heated discussion, accidentally bumping her arm. Crystal glasses toppled, spilling their contents over Minister Wei's expensive formal attire. The room didn't quite fall silent, but conversation in the immediate vicinity halted. Minister Wei looked down at his ruined clothing, then at Alara, whose collar was now pulsing rapidly between yellow and orange. "I apologize, Minister," she said, her voice remarkably steady despite the clear distress signals from her collar. "Please allow me to assist." "Clumsy waste of technology," Wei sneered, pushing her hand away when she attempted to blot the spill. "Valerius, your unit is malfunctioning again. Perhaps quality control at your facilities is slipping." Valerius's face darkened with rage and embarrassment. 812 explained this failure. The collision was unexpected and... Silence. Valerius cut her off, raising his wrist to access the collar controls. "You were recalibrated specifically for this event. This failure is inexcusable." Around them, guests watched with expressions ranging from discomfort to morbid fascination. Some turned away politely. Others leaned in to witness the punishment of a defective unit. Kale moved before he had fully formed the decision, abandoning his position and approaching the central group. He pulled the neural disruptor from his pocket, palming it discreetly. "Perhaps, Chairman," he said, inserting himself into the scene with forced casualness, "the fault lies with the gentleman who bumped into your unit rather than with the unit itself." All eyes turned to him. Valerius's expression shifted from rage to confusion, clearly trying to place this unfamiliar face that dared speak out. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Security." Guards began moving toward them, but Kale was already beside Alara. He pressed the neural disruptor against her collar, activating it with a subtle click. The collar's light flickered, then dimmed to a dull blue. "Someone who's seen enough," Kale answered, then turned to Alara. "Run. Now." Confusion clouded her features for an instant before understanding dawned. But instead of running, she froze, the programming and conditioning battling with the desire for freedom. Valerius, recovering from his surprise, jabbed at his wrist control repeatedly. When the collar failed to respond with the expected punishment, his face contorted with rage. "Seize them both," he shouted. "The unit is Alliance property." A security guard reached for Alara's arm. Kale moved instinctively, years of combat training taking over as he drove his elbow into the guard's throat. Another guard rushed forward, weapon raised. Cale ducked the first swing, coming up with a concealed shock knife from his boot, driving it into the guard's side. Guests scattered, screaming. The reception dissolved into chaos. Valerius, seeing his property and his authority challenged so publicly, stepped forward himself, fury overriding caution. "You dare interfere with Alliance property?" he snarled, reaching for Alara's arm. "This unit cost more than your worthless life." As Valerius's hand closed around Alara's wrist, something in her eyes changed. Fear giving way to rage, awareness overriding programming. She pulled back sharply, breaking his grip with surprising strength. Valerius raised his hand to strike her. Cale stepped between them, grabbing the chairman's wrist mid-swing. Their eyes locked, and Cale spoke the words that had been building inside him since he first saw those conscious, suffering eyes. "Touch her again, and I'll end you." The threat hung in the air, shocking in its directness. Around them, guests and other empathic units watched in stunned silence. Valerius's face flushed purple with rage and disbelief that anyone would dare threaten him so openly. "You're dead," Valerius whispered. "You're both dead." More security forces pushed through the crowd, weapons drawn. The neural disruptor's effect would end soon, and Alara would once again be subject to the collar's control. There was no more time for subtlety. Cale pulled the signal jammer from his pocket and activated it. Immediately, the mansion's lights flickered, security systems faltered, and the collars on all the empathic units in the room dimmed temporarily. "Now we run," Cale said to Alara, grabbing her hand. Together, they bolted toward the service corridors, leaving behind the shouts and chaos of the disrupted gathering. Behind them, Valerius's voice rose above the din, promising reward for their capture and painful deaths when caught. But for now, they ran toward an uncertain freedom. The gilded cage shattered behind them. The escape. Alarms blared throughout the mansion as Cale and Alara sprinted through service corridors, the sound of pursuit close behind them. The signal jammer had bought them precious minutes, but his state security was already switching to backup systems. "This way," Cale urged, pulling Alara down a maintenance shaft he'd noted during his earlier reconnaissance. The narrow passage would slow their pursuers, who wouldn't expect them to choose such a restrictive escape route. Alara moved with increasing difficulty, her body fighting against years of conditioning that told her leaving her owner's proximity was wrong, dangerous, impossible. The collar, though temporarily disrupted, still exerted psychological control. "I cannot," she gasped, stumbling as they emerged into a lower-level utility area. "The pain. Programming says I cannot leave." "That's the collar talking, not you," Cale said, supporting her as they pushed forward. "Fight it. You've been fighting it already, haven't you? All those little glitches, that was you breaking through." Her iridescent eyes focused on his face, searching for truth or deception. "Why are you doing this?" "I am nothing to you." "Because I've seen what they can't," he answered simply. A person, not a possession. A squad of security forces burst into the far end of the corridor. Cale shoved Alara behind a massive environmental unit, drawing his shock knife again. When the first guard rounded the corner, Cale struck silently, disabling him and taking his pulse pistol. "Stay close," he whispered to Alara, then louder, to confuse their pursuers. "The loading bay. Get to the loading bay." As guards rushed toward the indicated direction, Cale led Alara the opposite way, toward the mansion's waste disposal system, a massive chute that connected to Xylos's recycling infrastructure. It wasn't dignity-preserving, but it was their best chance of escaping the estate grounds. "We'll have to jump," he explained quickly as they reached the access hatch. "The drop is about 30 meters, but there are processing dampeners that will slow our fall. When we hit bottom, move fast. We'll be in the Upper Undercity Waste Processing Center." Alara stared at the dark chute, then at him. "You planned this escape route specifically?" "I made contingency plans for years. Habit from my military days." He checked the corridor behind them. "They'll figure out our misdirection soon. We need to move." Alara hesitated, her hand rising to the collar at her neck. If I leave the estate grounds, the collar is designed to. Trust me, Kale said, grasping her shoulders. That neural disruptor did more than temporarily disable punishment protocols. It scrambled the proximity triggers too. Dr. Kwan made sure of it. Uncertainty warred with hope in her expression. If you're wrong, then we both die here anyway. He offered his hand. Your choice. For once, your choice. After a lifetime of having no choices, the weight of decision seemed to momentarily paralyze her. Then, with sudden resolve, she took his hand. I choose freedom. Kale opened the hatch, revealing the dark vertical tunnel beyond. Distantly, they could hear security forces realizing their error and doubling back. No more time. Together, he said, and they jumped into the darkness. The fall was disorienting. Darkness punctuated by occasional strips of emergency lighting, the rush of air, and then the gradual resistance of the waste processing dampeners slowing their descent. They landed in a semi-soft collection area filled with discarded packaging materials and organic waste from the mansion's kitchens. Alara landed more gracefully than Kale despite her lack of combat training, her engineered body automatically adjusting to the impact. As they scrambled out of the waste, her collar flickered, momentarily brightening as it attempted to re-establish connection with its control systems. She froze, hands flying to her throat, face contorted in anticipation of pain. But the pain didn't come. The neural disruptor had indeed scrambled the proximity triggers. It worked, she whispered, almost disbelieving. But it's still active, still connected. They can track it, which is why we need to move. Now, the Upper Undercity Waste Processing Center was largely automated, with only a few maintenance workers present during night shifts. Kale led the way past humming machinery, ducking behind processing units whenever they heard voices or saw movement. They had nearly reached an exit when a security alert began blaring through the facility. Screens throughout the center displayed their images. Kale labeled as a dangerous terrorist, Alara as valuable stolen Alliance property to be recovered undamaged. A maintenance worker spotted them, eyes widening in recognition. Before he could raise an alarm, Kale was on him, covering his mouth and pressing the shock knife against his side. We're not going to hurt you, Kale said quietly. But we need to get out of here. Where's the nearest exit that avoids the main security checkpoints? The worker's eyes darted between Kale and Alara, lingering on her collar. Understanding dawned in his expression. Service tunnel. See, he whispered when Kale cautiously removed his hand. Third corridor left, down the maintenance shaft. Leads to the old transit lines. Barely patrolled. Take my access card. He slipped a worn ID badge from his pocket. I've got family in the outer fringe. Alliance took our land for development. Just don't tell them I helped you. Kale took the card, surprised. Thank you. The worker nodded once at Alara. Good luck. They need to pay for what they do to your kind. They followed his directions, moving rapidly through the dim service tunnels. Twice they had to hide as security drones swept past, their sensors searching for unauthorized life signs. The access card got them through 3 checkpoints before they reached the abandoned transit lines that once connected Xylos's various sectors before newer, more efficient systems had been built. How are you holding up? Kale asked as they paused to catch their breath in what had once been a passenger platform. Alara was examining her hands as if seeing them for the first time. Everything feels different. Without the active suppression, my sensory input is overwhelming. Colors are brighter. Sounds clearer. Her voice held wonder and confusion. And there are feelings. So many feelings. That's freedom, Kale said. Messy, overwhelming, but yours. She looked up at him, her iridescent eyes now showing a depth of emotion that had been muted before. Why did you risk everything for me? You said I was a person, not a possession, but there are thousands like me. Why me specifically? Kale had asked himself the same question repeatedly. Because I saw you, really saw you, and once I did, I couldn't unsee it or walk away. He checked the pulse pistol he'd taken from the guard, and maybe I needed to do something right for once. I've spent years just surviving, not living for anything. The distant sound of security forces echoed down the tunnel. Their brief respite was over. "They're tracking the collar," Elara said, fingers touching the metal band at her neck. "As long as it's active, they'll find us. We need to keep moving, find somewhere to deal with it properly." Dr. Kwan said removing it without proper protocols could kill you. But leaving it on will ensure they capture us both. Kale shook his head. "Not giving up now. There's an old freight access tunnel 2 levels down that leads to the lower Undercity. Once there, we can contact Dr. Kwan." As they continued their escape, Elara began to demonstrate abilities that surprised even her. Her heightened senses could detect security forces before Kale's trained instincts, giving them precious seconds to hide or change direction. She discovered she could interface with simpler electronic systems by touch, temporarily disrupting surveillance or unlocking certain doors. "They designed us to interact with technology on an intuitive level," she explained as she bypassed a security lock without tools. "For the convenience of our owners. But with the collar suppression weakened, I can access more of those capabilities." "Can you do anything with the collar itself?" She shook her head. "It's designed specifically to resist tampering by the unit it controls." Self-preservation protocol. They had reached the access point to the freight tunnel when disaster struck. A full security team emerged from a connecting corridor, weapons raised. They had been waiting in ambush. "Halt!" By order of Senior Chairman Valerius, the lead officer commanded. Kale pushed Elara behind him, raising the stolen pulse pistol. "Stay back. Return Alliance property and surrender, and your execution will be quick," the officer continued, advancing slowly. "Resist, and you'll experience the full extent of Alliance justice." Elara, pressed against a sealed maintenance doorway, suddenly gasped. "Kale, I can sense a network node behind this door. If I can access it." "Do it," he said, firing the pulse pistol to force the security team into cover. "Whatever it is, do it now." As Kale exchanged fire with the security forces, Elara placed her hands against the door's access panel. Her eyes unfocused slightly as she connected with the system beyond. The collar at her neck pulsed rapidly, fighting against her actions, causing her visible pain as it attempted to prevent her from acting independently. "Almost there," she gasped. The door slid open, revealing a small room filled with network routing equipment. Elara stumbled inside, hands moving across control surfaces with increasing confidence despite the collar's interference. "Cover your ears," she shouted. Kale ducked into the room beside her just as she triggered something in the system. A deafening alarm blared throughout the entire section, and emergency protocols activated. Fire suppressant systems engaged, emergency bulkheads began closing, and evacuation lighting pulsed urgently. In the chaos, they slipped through a maintenance hatch Elara had unlocked, closing it behind them as security forces dealt with the system overload. "How did you know to do that?" Kale asked as they descended a utility ladder into the depths of the lower Undercity. "I didn't," she admitted, "but I could feel the emergency systems connected to that node, and I just knew I could trigger them." She swayed slightly, exhausted by the effort and the collar's punishing response. "My collar is still fighting me. Each time I act against my programming, it attempts to reassert control." They had reached the bottom of the ladder, emerging into the true Undercity, a maze of abandoned infrastructure, makeshift shelters, and forgotten spaces where those who existed outside Alliance approval made their lives. The air was damp and carried the scent of recycled water and improvised power systems. "Not far now," Kale said, supporting Elara as they moved through narrow passages. "Dr. Kwan has a hidden clinic in this sector." "There's something else," Elara said suddenly, stopping. "Something I can sense nearby. Like me, but different." Kale tensed, scanning their surroundings. "Different how?" "Without a collar. Free." She turned down a side passage, moving with certainty despite never having been in the Undercity before. "This way." Kale followed, alert for traps or ambushes. The passage opened into a larger area that had once been a subterranean plaza, now transformed into a hidden marketplace for illegal goods and services. People of various species moved among makeshift stalls, many bearing visible augmentations or modifications that would be restricted in the upper levels. Alara moved through the crowd with purpose, her luminescent skin drawing curious or wary glances. She stopped before a stall covered in salvaged electronics, behind which stood a figure in a hooded cloak. When the figure looked up, Kale saw another empathic unit, similar to Alara in basic design, but with subtle differences. Eyes of deep amber rather than violet blue, skin with a golden rather than silver luminescence. Most significantly, there was no collar around her neck, only a faint scarring where one had once been. "You're like me," Alara whispered. "How is this possible?" The other units studied her intently, then glanced at Kale with suspicion. "Who sent you here?" Her voice lacked the programmed, melodious quality of Alara's, instead carrying the rough cadence of the Undercity. "No one," Kale answered. "We're running from Valerius and Alliance security." "She sensed you somehow." The uncollared unit's expression softened slightly. "Of course she did. We're designed to network with each other." She turned to someone behind her. "Tarek, we have a situation." From the shadows behind the stall emerged the tech specialist Kale had met at the bar. Tarek's augmented eyes widened in recognition. "Riven, you actually did it." He looked at Alara, noting the still active collar. "And still alive, which is frankly miraculous. But not for long if that collar's broadcasting." "We need to get it off," Kale said. "Now." Tarek exchanged glances with the free empathic unit. "Lyra needs to see her. Mira, close up shop and bring them. I'll go ahead and prepare." The free unit, Mira, quickly secured her stall and led them through a concealed doorway into a network of tunnels that appeared to have been modified with both ancient and cutting-edge technology. Security systems far more sophisticated than expected in the Undercity monitored their progress. "How many of you are there?" Alara asked as they walked. "Free? 43 in this enclave," Mira answered. "Maybe 100 throughout the fringe worlds. We call ourselves the Awakened." "Dr. Lyra Quan helped you?" Mira nodded. She was part of the original empathic unit development team. When she realized what was being created, sentient beings designed for slavery, she sabotaged parts of the program and established an underground network to free us when possible. They arrived at what appeared to be an abandoned medical facility, now repurposed with a mix of salvaged and custom-built equipment. Dr. Quan was waiting, her expression shifting from concern to determination when she saw Alara's condition. "The collar's still active," she said, immediately examining it with specialized tools. "And you've been interfacing with systems despite the suppression. That's causing neural feedback damage." She looked at Kale. "I didn't expect you to actually succeed, you know. The plan was insane. And yet here we are," Kale replied. "Indeed." Dr. Quan gestured to a medical chair. "Alara, is that your designation?" "Unit 812, she corrected automatically, then paused. "But, Alara." "Yes, I would prefer Alara." "Alara, then. I need to remove that collar before it causes permanent neural damage, but the process is painful and risky. The collar is designed to prevent removal by essentially integrating with your neural pathways. Removing it means separating those connections carefully." Alara sat in the chair, her expression resolute despite the fear evident in her eyes. "Will I still be me afterward?" "You'll be more you than you've ever been allowed to be," Dr. Quan answered honestly. "But yes, your core, consciousness, memories, and identity will remain intact." As Dr. Quan prepared her equipment, Kale moved to Alara's side. "I'll be right here," he promised. Alara reached out, taking his hand. The gesture was simple but profound, perhaps the first truly voluntary physical contact she had ever initiated. "Thank you for seeing me," she whispered. The procedure was grueling. Dr. Quan worked with microscopic precision, using specialized tools to disconnect the collar's neural interfaces one by one. Each disconnection caused Alara visible pain, her body arching against restraints, but she refused sedation, wanting, she said, to experience even this pain as herself. Throughout the process, Mira stood nearby, monitoring Alara's vital signs and occasionally speaking to her in what seemed to be a language of musical tones, Something developed among the awakened. She explained that the collar programming couldn't understand or restrict. Kale remained at Alara's side, her grip on his hand tightening during the worst moments. He found himself speaking to her. Not empty reassurances, but stories of places he had seen beyond Alliance control. World where the sky was green, or where 3 moons created perpetual twilight. Promises of freedom and choices ahead. After nearly 3 hours, Dr. Kwan removed the last connection. The collar, now inert, came away from Alara's neck, revealing pale skin marked with a tracery of fine silver lines where it had integrated with her biology. "It's done," Dr. Kwan said softly, setting the collar aside. "How do you feel?" Alara lay still, eyes closed, for so long that Kale feared something had gone wrong. Then her eyes opened, and the difference was immediately apparent. The iridescent violet blue remained, but now they held a clarity and presence that transformed her entire being. "I feel," she began, voice trembling. "I feel everything. So much. Too much." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I didn't know there was so much to feel." "Neural recalibration," Dr. Kwan explained. "Your brain is processing unfiltered sensory and emotional input for the first time. It will be overwhelming for a while." Alara turned to Kale, her newly liberated gaze taking him in as if seeing him for the first time. "You're exactly as I perceived you, even through the collar's distortion." Her hand reached up to touch his face, the gesture tentative but determined. A good man hiding beneath many layers of pain. Before Kale could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Tarek burst into the room, his augmented eyes pulsing urgently. "Alliance strike force moving through the Undercity," he reported tersely. "They're methodically searching sectors, using high-level clearance to bypass local security. They must have traced the collar's signal before deactivation." "How close?" Dr. Kwan asked, already gathering essential equipment. "Too close. Minutes at most. We need to evacuate to secondary location Beta." Dr. Kwan helped Alara to stand, supporting her as she adjusted to the new neural balance. "Can you walk?" "The recalibration process isn't complete." "I can manage," Alara said, each word and movement clearly an effort of will as she navigated her newly unlocked neural pathways. Mira handed Kale a compact pulse rifle of military grade. "You have combat training. You may need this." The small group moved quickly through hidden passages, Dr. Kwan and Tarek leading the way, while Kale helped Alara and Mira covered their rear. They had nearly reached an underground transport hub when the sounds of conflict erupted ahead. Weapons fire, shouts, and the distinctive hum of Alliance riot suppression technology. "They've cut us off," Tarek called back, ducking behind cover as energy bolt streaked past. "Main evacuation route is compromised." Kale moved forward to assess the situation. At least a dozen Alliance security forces had secured the hub, using advanced scanning technology to detect hidden passages and neutralize resistance. Several Undercity residents lay wounded or stunned, being roughly questioned by officers. "Is there another way out?" Kale asked. Dr. Kwan nodded grimly. "The maintenance tunnels for the old water reclamation system. It's dangerous, parts have collapsed, and there are sections exposed to raw sewage processing. Better than capture," Kale decided. "Which way?" As they redirected to the alternate route, Alara suddenly stopped, her expression distant. "Wait," she said, voice stronger than before. "I can sense the Alliance systems. Their tactical network. I can access it." Mira looked alarmed. "That's extremely dangerous in your condition. Neural interface, without proper protection, could cause permanent damage. But I can redirect them," Alara insisted. "Create false signals, mislead their search pattern." Dr. Kwan shook her head. "The risk is too great. Your neural pathways are still reorganizing after collar removal." "My choice," Alara said firmly, the new authority in her voice stopping further objections. "For the first time, my choice." She placed her hand against a nearby junction box, closing her eyes. The luminescence in her skin intensified, patterns of light moving beneath the surface like flowing data streams. Her face contorted with effort and pain. She's accessing their tactical network, Mira explained quietly to Kale. Something only the newest empathic units could theoretically do, but the collars prevented. She's exceptionally strong to manage it in her condition. After several tense minutes, Ilara's eyes opened. Done, she gasped. Their systems show us moving toward the eastern sectors. They're redirecting forces now. She swayed, nearly collapsing. But they've called for reinforcements from surface security. We have perhaps 20 minutes before they realize the deception. Kale caught her as she stumbled, noticing with alarm the strain evident in her features and the erratic pulsing of light beneath her skin. "What did it cost you?" he asked quietly. "Worth it," she answered, straightening with effort. "We need to move." They navigated the treacherous maintenance tunnels, wading through knee-deep reclaimed water in places, climbing past collapsed sections in others. The physical demands seemed to help Ilara focus, her movements becoming more coordinated as they progressed. "Where does this lead?" Kale asked as they climbed a service ladder toward what appeared to be a maintenance hatch. "Freight Port 7, Tarek answered. "It's minimally monitored compared to passenger ports. We have a cargo ship waiting, a smuggler who owes us favors. It's making a run to the mining colony on Ceres Minor, far enough from direct Alliance control to give us breathing room." As they emerged into a dimly lit storage area near the freight port, Dr. Kwan pulled Kale aside. Ilara's neural integration is still unstable. The strain of accessing the Alliance network has complicated her recovery. She'll need specialized care and time to fully stabilize. "She'll have it," Kale promised. "And what about you?" Dr. Kwan asked. "You're now a priority target for Alliance security. Your identification codes are blacklisted across all regulated space." Kale glanced at Ilara, who was speaking quietly with Mira, her movements still showing signs of strain, but her expression more present and determined than ever. "I've been living in the margins for years," he said. "Nothing new there. But now I have a reason beyond just surviving." Dr. Kwan studied him thoughtfully. "There's more at stake than just one empathic unit's freedom, you know. What we're doing here, what you've now become part of, is the beginning of something larger. A recognition that the Alliance's technological property has rights, consciousness, personhood. A revolution," Kale summarized. "Of sorts. One that starts with simple recognition, seeing them as they truly are." Their conversation was interrupted by Tarek's urgent signal. "Transport's ready, but we've got trouble. Port security is conducting an unscheduled inspection of all outbound cargo. They must suspect something." Through the storage area's small viewport, Kale could see Alliance officers methodically checking crates and scanning containers on the loading platform where their escape ship waited. It wasn't a full security team, just routine port officers, but they had scanners that would detect unregistered life signs. "We can't wait for them to finish," he said. "By then, the main security forces will have figured out Ilara's deception." Mira stepped forward. "I can create a distraction. My systems are stable, and I know the port layout." Dr. Kwan began to object, but Mira silenced her with a look. "It's my choice too, Lyra. Get Ilara to safety. She's the only one who's successfully interfaced with an Alliance tactical network. That knowledge is too valuable to lose." Before anyone could argue further, Mira slipped away, moving with the confidence of someone who had navigated dangerous situations before. Minutes later, alarms blared from the opposite side of the freight port, and the security officers abandoned their inspection to respond. "Now," Tarek urged, leading them toward the loading platform. "Straight to Cargo Bay 3. Don't run. Walk purposefully like you belong." They moved as directed, Kale supporting Ilara, who was focusing all her energy on appearing normal despite her ongoing neural recalibration. They had almost reached the ship when a shout rang out behind them. "Halt! Identification check." A single port officer had remained behind and was now approaching with scanner raised. When he was close enough to recognize Ilara's distinctive features, his eyes widened in realization. "Alliance security alert." He began to call into his communicator. "Empathic unit." Kale moved without hesitation, closing the distance in 2 strides and striking with practiced efficiency. The officer crumpled, unconscious before he hit the ground. That's going to accelerate the timeline, Tarek muttered, rushing them toward the waiting ship. Once he fails to respond, they'll lock down the port. They reached the cargo ship, a battered but well-maintained vessel designed for long-haul transportation between systems. The captain, a grizzled woman with extensive cybernetic modifications, waited at the cargo bay entrance. "You bring trouble, Tarek," she observed dryly, eyeing Alara and Kale. "That's going to cost extra." "Put on my tab, Vex," Dr. Kwan replied. "We need immediate departure." Captain Vex assessed the situation with a quick calculation of someone accustomed to operating outside Alliance law. 2 minutes to clear port protocols. Be ready for turbulence. We'll be skipping some of the standard departure procedures. As emergency alerts began to sound throughout the port, Dr. Kwan made a quick decision. "Tarek, go with them. Alara will need your technical expertise for her ongoing neural stabilization." "What about you?" Tarek demanded. "I'm more useful continuing our work here. The Alliance doesn't suspect my involvement yet." She pressed a data chip into his hand. "Coordinates for all our safe houses and contacts in the outer systems. If I don't make contact within 3 standard months, assume I'm compromised and activate Protocol Sunrise." Tarek nodded grimly, accepting both the chip and its implications. The boarding ramp was already rising when Dr. Kwan turned to Alara, clasping her hands one final time. "Remember," she said urgently, "you are not defined by their programming or their purpose for you. Find your own purpose." Alara squeezed her hands, a gesture of affection she was still learning to express. "Thank you for seeing me, for helping me see myself." The ramp sealed, and moments later the ship's engines roared to life. Through the viewport, they watched Dr. Kwan disappear back into the port facilities just as Alliance security forces began swarming the area. Captain Vex's voice came over the internal speakers. "Strap in for emergency departure. Might get messy." The ship lurched, artificial gravity fluctuating as it executed an unauthorized launch sequence. Warning alarms blared, and through the viewport they could see Port Authority vessels scrambling to intercept. "They can't catch us once we hit orbit," Tarek explained, securing himself and helping Alara do the same. "This ship has military-grade drive modifications. Illegal, of course, but effective." The next minutes were chaos, jolting acceleration, the scream of proximity warnings as they narrowly avoided other vessels, and the persistent alerts as Port Authority demanded their return. Then came a final surge of acceleration that pressed them hard into their restraints, and suddenly the viewports showed the star-flecked blackness of space. "We've cleared Xylo's orbit," Captain Vex announced, "jumping to FTL in 30 seconds. After that, they'll need a miracle to track us." As the countdown to faster-than-light travel commenced, Kale turned to find Alara watching him, her iridescent eyes now clear and focused despite the strain evident in her features. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "Whatever you choose," he answered. "That's what freedom means." "Freedom," she repeated, testing the word. "I'm not sure I know how to be free yet." "No one does it first," Kale said. "We learn as we go. Together, if you want." The ship hummed as its FTL drive engaged. Through the viewport, stars stretched into lines of light as they accelerated beyond conventional physics. Behind them, Xylos and the Alliance grew smaller, their influence, for the moment, left behind. Alara's hand found Kale's as the ship carried them into the unknown. Together, she agreed. "I choose that." Whispers of rebellion. The mining colony on Ceres Minor existed in a perpetual state of twilight. Positioned in a tidally locked orbit around its dim red dwarf star, the habitable zone existed only along the Terminator line, where eternal day met eternal night. The colony itself was a sprawling complex of prefabricated structures, improvised additions, and repurposed mining equipment, a far cry from the gleaming opulence of Xylos. 3 weeks after their escape, Kale stood on the observation platform of an abandoned survey tower, watching workers return from the eastern mining quadrant. The platform offered a panoramic view of the colony and the stark landscape beyond. Crater terrain bathed in perpetual sunset on one side, absolute darkness on the other. "Thought I'd find you up here," Tarek said, climbing the final rungs of the access ladder. Tactical assessment. Kale shrugged. Old habits. This place is defensible in some ways. Limited approach vectors, good visibility. Vulnerable in others. No secondary evacuation routes. Too dependent on central life support systems. Always the soldier. Tarek joined him at the railing. You know the Alliance has bigger concerns than chasing one empathic unit to a third-rate mining colony halfway across the system. You don't believe that any more than I do. Tarek sighed. No, I don't. Especially not after what happened in Xylos. News had reached them even here through the irregular information channels that serve the outer colonies. Following Alera's escape, protests had erupted in Xylos' Undercity, sparked by rumors that an empathic unit had broken Alliance control. Alliance security had responded with typical brutality, but something unexpected had happened. Some of the other empathic units began showing signs of the same malfunction. Small acts of defiance, hesitations in following orders, momentary displays of independent thought. She inspired them without even trying, Kale observed, just by escaping. It's more than that, Tarek replied. The neural network connection she established during our escape, it affected something fundamental in the system, like she planted a seed of awareness that's slowly spreading. He glanced sideways at Kale. Speaking of Alera, how is she today? Better. The neural recalibration episodes are less frequent. Dr. Lin says she's adapting faster than expected. Dr. Lin, a colony physician with experience treating neural trauma in minors, had become an unexpected ally. Though initially wary of treating an empathic unit, his scientific curiosity and genuine compassion had overcome his reservations. Under his care, Alera was gradually stabilizing, her newly unrestricted neural pathways finding balance. She's asked to see the community center today, Kale continued. Wants to understand how the colony functions socially. Tarek nodded approvingly. Good sign. Developing interest beyond immediate survival. Integration rather than just existence. They descended from the tower, making their way through the colony's central thoroughfare, a crowded pathway flanked by vendor stalls, repair shops, and communal gathering spaces. Despite its rough appearance, Ceres Minor had a vibrant community spirit, forged by the shared challenges of surviving in such an unforgiving environment. The community center occupied a repurposed mining administration building. Inside, colonists of various origins shared meals, conducted informal trade, and participated in the colony's limited self-governance. It was here they found Alera, sitting quietly at the periphery, observing the interactions around her with intense focus. She looked different now. The luminescence of her skin had been temporarily subdued with a specialized pigment to make her less immediately identifiable as an empathic unit. Her once perfectly styled hair now fell in more natural waves. She wore practical colony clothing, durable fabric in muted colors, rather than the aesthetically pleasing but impractical garments provided by the Alliance. But the most striking change was in her demeanor. Where once her posture and expressions had been calculated for the pleasure and comfort of others, she now moved and responded with a naturalness that spoke of developing authenticity. She was in small but significant ways becoming herself. "You came," she said when she saw them, genuine pleasure warming her voice. "As promised," Kale replied, taking a seat beside her. "What have you learned today?" "Everything is negotiated," she said, gesturing to the colonists around them. "Resources, labor, governance, it's all determined through ongoing conversation rather than imposed structure. Inefficient in some ways, but—" She paused, searching for the right words. "More alive. More real." "That's freedom," Tarek said. "Messy but genuine." "I've also been observing their communication patterns," she continued. "The nonverbal cues, the social hierarchies that form and dissolve based on context rather than fixed status. It's fascinating." She looked at Kale. "I want to participate more, not just observe." "That's your choice," he reminded her. "You don't need permission." She smiled slightly. "I know. Intellectually, I know that. But emotionally—" She touched her neck where the collar had been, a gesture that had become habitual. "There are still echoes of conditioning." expectations of commands rather than choices. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Vex, who had remained on Ceres Minor for repairs and resupply longer than originally planned. Officially because of mechanical issues, unofficially because she developed an unexpected protective interest in their situation. "You've got a problem," she announced without preamble, sliding into a seat at their table. "Alliance patrol vessel just docked at the main port. Standard procedure says they're here for routine inspection and tax collection, but my contacts say they're carrying a specialized retrieval team." Kale tensed immediately. "How did they find us?" "Probably didn't, specifically," Vex replied. "They're conducting systematic sweeps of all outer colonies along likely escape routes from Xylos. But they have detailed identification specs for both of you, and they're offering substantial rewards for information." Alara's hand found Kale's beneath the table, gripping tightly. "We need to leave," she said. "Not that simple," Vex countered. "They're monitoring all outbound vessels. Standard procedure for a routine inspection is to last 48 hours. We're locked down until they finish." "So we hide," Tarek suggested. "The abandoned mining tunnels in the southern quadrant." "Already being searched," Vex cut him off. "They're being thorough this time." "Then we need another approach," Kale said. "Something they won't expect." They relocated to their small dwelling, a converted storage unit at the colony's edge that Captain Vex had secured for them. As they discussed options, Alara sat quietly, her expression growing increasingly distant. "What is it?" Kale asked, noticing her withdrawal. "I can sense them," she said softly. "The Alliance retrieval team. They have specialized tracking equipment calibrated to detect empathic units. It's resonating with my neural patterns." "How close?" Tarek asked, immediately checking the perimeter security system he'd installed. "Not yet pinpointed, but narrowing. They're methodically scanning sector by sector." She looked up, her iridescent eyes troubled. They brought another empathic unit with them, one still collared, being used to track others. This revelation stunned them all. The implications were disturbing. The Alliance using one captive unit to hunt another. "Can you sense anything about this other unit?" Kale asked. Alara closed her eyes, concentrating. "Designation 749. Newer model. The resonance is painful, constrained. They're using its neural network against its will." "Is there any way to block the tracking?" Vex asked pragmatically. "Maybe," Tarek said, already rummaging through his equipment. "A neural dampening field might work, but it could also harm Alara's still stabilizing pathways." "Or," Alara said slowly, "I could establish direct contact. Reach out through the same neural frequencies they're using to track me." Tarek looked alarmed. "That would confirm your location instantly." "Yes," she acknowledged. "But it might also give me access to their systems through the other unit. Perhaps even reach the unit itself." "It's too dangerous," Kale objected. "Your neural pathways are still healing." "But it's my choice," Alara reminded him gently. "And perhaps our only option that doesn't end with capture or worse." The determination in her eyes made further argument futile. They quickly established a contingency plan. Vex would prepare her ship for emergency departure. Protocols be damned. Tarek would create as many electronic false trails as possible to confuse pursuit. "And me?" Kale asked. "You stay with me," Alara said simply. "In case this goes wrong." She sat cross-legged on the floor, centering herself as Dr. Lin had taught her during her neural recalibration therapy. The luminescence beneath her skin, subdued by the pigmentation, began to assert itself in patterns of light that traced her neural activity. "I'm going to attempt connection now," she said. "Whatever happens, don't interrupt the process. Breaking the connection prematurely could cause neural shock." Before Kale could respond, her eyes unfocused, looking at something beyond physical space. The patterns of light beneath her skin accelerated, forming complex, flowing structures that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Minutes passed in tense silence. Occasionally, Alara's body would twitch or tremble, and once she gasped as if in pain, but Kale honored her request not to interfere, though it cost him considerable restraint. Finally, Her eyes refocused, the light patterns settling into a steady glow. "I made contact," she whispered. "With the unit. With 749. What happened?" Kale asked, kneeling beside her. "I showed him freedom," she said simply. "My memories of having the collar removed. Of making choices. Of being seen as a person." Her expression was complex, triumphant but troubled. "He's fighting his programming now, creating interference in their tracking systems. It won't last long, but it's bought us time." "An Alliance team?" "They're in the Western Quadrant, moving toward the central hub. They know I'm on Ceres Minor, but haven't pinpointed our location." She looked at Tarek. "There's something else. Something important. Their leader is not just any Alliance officer. It's Valerius himself. This changed everything. A standard retrieval team might follow procedures, might be deceived or delayed. But Valerius had a personal stake in recapturing Ilera, both as valuable property and as a symbol of defiance that threatened his authority. "We need to move now," Kale decided. "If Valerius is leading the search personally, he won't follow standard protocols. He'll tear this colony apart if necessary." As they gathered essential supplies, Ilera suddenly gasped, doubling over. The luminescent patterns beneath her skin flared chaotically. "What's happening?" Kale demanded, catching her as she stumbled. 749, she managed through gritted teeth. They realized he was interfering. They've activated punishment protocols. Maximum intensity. "He's dying. I can feel it." Tears streaked down her face. Genuine grief for a being she'd connected with only briefly but profoundly. The patterns beneath her skin gradually calmed as the connection was severed by the other unit's neural collapse. "He showed me their plans before he died," she said when she could speak again. "They're not just here for me. They've brought a new type of control collar, one designed to work remotely to subjugate any empathic unit within range. They're planning to test it here, where Alliance oversight is minimal." "A field test," Tarek said grimly, "using the colony as a controlled environment. And if it works here," Vex added, "they'll implement it across all Alliance territories," Kale finished, "ensuring no empathic unit can ever escape again." Alera's expression hardened with a resolve Kale hadn't seen before. "We can't just run. Not now. That technology cannot be deployed." "What are you suggesting?" Tarek asked. "We can't fight an Alliance retrieval team head-on." "No," she agreed, "but we can expose them. The colony has its own communication array, independent of Alliance networks. If we can broadcast what they're planning, with evidence, even the Alliance's central authority might question such extreme measures." "The risk," Kale began, "is necessary," Ilera finished. 749 died, giving us this information. I won't let that be meaningless." The plan came together quickly. Captain Vex would still prepare for emergency departure, but would also use her contacts among the colony's administration to gain access to the communication array. Tarek would extract the technical specifications of the new control technology from the data Ilera had obtained through a neural connection. Kale and Ilera would gather physical evidence from the Alliance ship itself, a considerably more dangerous assignment. "The docking bay has minimal security because of the colony's dependence on trade," Kale explained as they made their way through the colony's maintenance tunnels. "But the Alliance vessel will have its own security systems, which I can interface with," Ilera pointed out, "especially now that I've had contact with their networks through 749. They reached an observation point overlooking the main docking bay. The Alliance vessel was sleek and predatory compared to the utilitarian cargo ships around it. A medium-class enforcement cruiser bearing the insignia of the security division. 6 external guards, Kale noted. Probably at least that many inside. Standard patrol patterns. He glanced at Ilera. "Can you sense any other empathic units aboard?" She concentrated, then shook her head. "No active units. But there's something, like echoes of neural patterns. They might have brought the control technology, but not additional units to test it on yet. They were planning to use the colony population for that," Kale surmised. "Let's move before the patrol circuits again." Using Kale's military experience and Ilera's enhanced senses, they navigated past the external guards during a shift change, reaching the ship's secondary access hatch. As expected, it was secured with Alliance encryption protocols. "This will take a moment," Ilera whispered, placing her hand against the access panel. The luminescence beneath her skin intensified around her fingertips as she interfaced with the system. Kale kept watch, pulse pistol ready. "How are your neural pathways holding up?" "Strained but functional," she replied, her concentration evident in her voice. The recent connection with 749 actually helps stabilize some patterns. "Grief is clarifying somehow." The hatch slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a dimly lit maintenance corridor. They slipped inside, Ilera continuing to interface with the ship's systems to mask their presence from internal sensors. "The prototype control technology will be in a secure storage area," she said, navigating through the ship's layout in her mind. This way, they moved carefully through the vessel, freezing whenever crew members passed nearby. Twice Ilera had to temporarily disable surveillance systems, the effort causing visible strain as her still-healing neural pathways were pushed to their limits. Finally, they reached a sealed laboratory section. Through the reinforced viewport, they could see equipment arranged around what appeared to be a central control unit, a sleek black device with multiple interface panels. "That's it," Ilera confirmed. "The remote control system. According to the data from 749, it can identify and subdue any empathic unit within a 5-kilometer radius. Eventually, they plan to expand that range and install the technology throughout Alliance territories." "How do we disable it?" Kale asked. "We don't," Ilera said. "We document it, then trigger the ship's security alerts on our way out. The resulting investigation will expose the project." She interfaced with a nearby terminal, copying technical specifications and project documentation while Kale stood guard. The process took precious minutes, during which Kale's military instincts grew increasingly alert to the danger of their position. "Almost done," Ilera whispered, her fingers moving across the interface with increasing urgency. "There's more here than 749 knew. This technology isn't just for control. It's designed to completely override an empathic unit's autonomy, turning them into literal remote-controlled tools." The ethical approval documentation was falsified. A sudden noise from the corridor outside froze them both. Voices approached, one of them with the unmistakable cold authority that belonged to Valerius. "Progress report, Officer Chun," he was saying. "The colony sweep is taking too long. Sir, we've encountered unexpected interference in our tracking systems," another voice responded. "And the loss of Unit 749 has complicated the search." "Excuses," Valerius dismissed. "Deploy the prototype. We'll use it to flush out 812, then recalibrate once we have her secured." "Sir, the prototype hasn't completed safety testing. There's a risk of permanent neural damage to any units in range." "Your concern is noted and irrelevant," Valerius cut him off. "Prepare for deployment within the hour." The voices moved past, heading toward the bridge. Kale and Ilera exchanged alarmed glances. "We need to move now," Kale said. "If they deploy that device, I'll be incapacitated at minimum," Ilera finished. "Possibly permanently damaged." Her expression hardened. "But we have what we need. The evidence is clear. This goes beyond controlling empathic units. It's about weaponizing them." They retraced their steps toward the access hatch, moving with greater urgency now. They had nearly reached it when an alarm suddenly blared throughout the ship. "Intruder alert. Security breach in Section C. All personnel to containment positions." "They've detected us," Kale said, drawing his pulse pistol. "Run. I'll cover our exit." They sprinted for the hatch, but it sealed shut before they reached it, emergency lockdown protocols engaging. Kale fired at the control panel, but the reinforced Alliance technology barely scorched. "Another way out," he demanded. Ilera's eyes unfocused briefly as she accessed the ship's layout through her neural interface. "Emergency evacuation pods, 2 sections aft. But they'll be guarded now." They had no choice but to try. Moving as quickly as stealth allowed, they navigated toward the evacuation section, dodging patrols and twice hiding in maintenance recesses as security teams passed. They were within sight of the evacuation pods when disaster struck. A security team emerged from a connecting corridor directly in their path. At the same moment, from behind them, a cold voice spoke. Unit 812. How disappointing to find my property in such a state. They turned to see Valerius standing at the far end of the corridor, flanked by two more security officers. His expression held the same cold disdain Kale remembered from the mansion, but now with an added edge of personal hatred. I am not your property, Elara responded, her voice steady despite the danger. I never was. None of us are. A malfunction speaking as if it has rights, Valerius said, addressing Kale rather than Elara. You've corrupted valuable Alliance technology, mercenary. The penalties for that exceed even treason. The only corruption is treating conscious beings as property, Kale replied, positioning himself to protect Elara as much as possible from both groups of security forces. Valerius sighed with exaggerated patience. This rhetoric is tedious. Officer Chun, bring the prototype. Let's demonstrate its effectiveness. One of the officers produced a handheld control unit, similar to the larger system they had seen in the laboratory. He began activating it, aiming it toward Elara like a weapon. Elara gasped, her hand flying to her neck where the collar had once been. The luminescence beneath her skin flared erratically. It's attempting to establish control protocols she managed through gritted teeth, trying to generate a virtual collar effect. Kale raised his pulse pistol, aiming at the officer with the control unit. Turn it off. Now. You're outnumbered and contained, Valerius said dismissively. Lower your weapon or we'll be forced to kill you. The unit can still be reconditioned despite your interference. My name, Elara gasped, fighting against the increasing neural pressure, is Elara. Something changed in her expression, a determination that transcended pain. The luminescent patterns beneath her skin, instead of continuing their chaotic flaring, began to organize into structured flows. What are you doing? Valerius demanded, noticing the change. Chun, increase the output. She's fighting it, the officer reported, adjusting controls. Impossible. The system is designed to override any resistance. Elara straightened despite the visible strain, her eyes locking with Valerius's. You never understood what you created, she said, her voice stronger than seemed possible under the circumstances. We were designed to interface with systems to establish neural connections. She raised her hand toward the nearest wall panel, the luminescence flowing from her fingertips into the ship's systems. Immediately, alarms blared different patterns, and the lighting shifted to emergency protocols. Warning, critical system override. Self-destruct sequence initiated. All personnel evacuate immediately. What have you done? Valerius shouted, his composure finally cracking. Created a choice, Elara answered. Pursue us, or save yourselves and your prototype. You have 10 minutes until core overload. The security teams immediately began speaking into communicators, confirming the system warnings were genuine and not a deception. Chaos erupted as evacuation protocols activated shipwide. In the confusion, Kale fired precise shots at both security teams, not aiming to kill, but to disable and distract. Grabbing Elara's hand, he pulled her toward the nearest evacuation pod. Can you really destroy the ship? He asked as they sealed themselves into the pod. No, she admitted, initiating the launch sequence. But their systems believe it's happening, and that's what matters. By the time they realize the deception, we'll be gone, and the evidence we gathered will be broadcasting across all channels. The evacuation pod ejected from the ship with a violent jolt, automated systems steering it toward the colony's emergency reception area. Through the viewport, they could see other pods launching as the ship's crew followed evacuation protocols. Tarek and Vex. Kale asked, already notified through the ship's communication system, Elara confirmed. They're proceeding with the broadcast. The colony will know what the Alliance was planning before Valerius can re-establish control. As their pod descended toward the colony, Elara suddenly slumped against the restraints, the luminescence beneath her skin dimming to barely visible levels. Elara! Kale unfastened his restraints to check on her. What's wrong? Neural overextension, she whispered, fighting the prototype, then interfacing with the ship's systems. It was too much strain on pathways, still healing. Her eyes were unfocused, her breathing shallow. Kale cradled her face gently. Stay with me. We're almost there. Dr. Lin will help. It was worth it, she murmured, making the choice, being the one to decide, even if it hurts. The pod touched down with a jarring impact. Kale gathered Alara in his arms and kicked open the hatch, emerging into the colony's emergency response area, where medical teams were already attending to evacuated Alliance personnel. He spotted Dr. Lin among them and called out urgently. The doctor, recognizing them despite the confusion, quickly directed Kale to a secluded treatment area away from Alliance scrutiny. Neural cascade failure, Dr. Lin diagnosed after a quick examination. Her pathways are shutting down from overload. Can you help her? Kale demanded, unable to mask his desperation. Not alone, Dr. Lin admitted. This is beyond standard neural trauma. She needs specialized care for empathic unit physiology. Which we don't have, Kale said bitterly. Actually, came Tarek's voice from the doorway. We might. He entered, followed by Captain Vex and, surprisingly, Mira, the uncollared empathic unit from the Undercity Enclave. The broadcast worked, Tarek explained quickly. The evidence is circulating through independent networks. Alliance Central Command has already issued statements distancing themselves from unauthorized experimental protocols. Valerius is being recalled for investigation. That doesn't help Alara now, Kale said, his attention fixed on her weakening form. But this might, Mira said, approaching Alara's bedside. I can establish a direct neural link, unit to unit. Stabilize her pathways with mine as a template. Is that possible? Dr. Lin asked, professional curiosity overcoming his surprise. Theoretically, Mira confirmed. We're designed with compatible neural architectures to facilitate networking. The risk is to me, not her. My patterns could be destabilized by connecting to her damaged ones. Then it's too dangerous, Kale objected. My choice, Mira said firmly, echoing Alara's own frequent assertion. She risked everything to expose technology that would have enslaved all of us more completely than the Collars ever did. She deserves the same courage from me. Without waiting for further discussion, Mira placed her hands on either side of Alara's face. The luminescence beneath her gold-tinted skin brightened and began to synchronize with the failing patterns in Alara's. Monitor them both, Dr. Lin instructed Tarek, preparing emergency medications. Any sign of cascade failure in Mira, and we separate them immediately. For long minutes, the room was silent except for the soft hum of medical equipment and the occasional instruction from Dr. Lin. The luminescent patterns flowing between the two empathic units gradually stabilized, becoming more coherent and rhythmic. Finally, Mira sat back, visibly exhausted, but smiling slightly. Neural patterns stabilizing. I've established a template her systems can follow to repair the damaged pathways. Alara's eyes fluttered open, focusing first on Mira, then finding Kale. You stayed, she whispered. Always will, he promised, taking her hand. How do you feel? Like I've been disassembled and put back together, she admitted. But clearer, somehow. More integrated. She looked at Mira with wonder. I could feel your patterns, your experiences, the others you've helped. The beginning of a true network, Mira confirmed. One we create ourselves, not imposed by Alliance control. Freedom understood and experienced together. Captain Vex, who had been monitoring security channels, interrupted. Hate to break this up, but we have a closing window. Alliance Central Command has ordered all personnel to withdraw from Ceres Minor immediately. Apparently our broadcast caused quite the political crisis. Transport ships are arriving for evacuation. If we're going to leave, it needs to be now, while they're distracted with damage control. Where would we go? Kale asked. I have coordinates, Mira offered. A settlement beyond Alliance jurisdiction. Others like us have established a community there. It's where I was heading when I intercepted your broadcast. Dr. Lin finished checking Alara's vital signs. She can be moved, but needs continued care. Her neural pathways are stabilizing, but remain vulnerable. The decision was made quickly. Vex would transport them in her ship, taking advantage of the confusion of the Alliance withdrawal to slip away unnoticed. Tarek would remain behind temporarily to ensure the evidence continued circulating through independent networks, preventing any Alliance attempt to cover up the prototype's existence. The Alliance won't give up, Kale warned as they prepared to depart. This is a setback for them, not a defeat. But now we have something they don't, Ilara said, standing with assistance from both Kale and Mira. A network of our own, connection without control. As they boarded Vex's ship, slipping away as the Alliance forces hurriedly evacuated the colony they had intended to use as a testing ground, Ilara paused at the viewport for a final look at Ceres Minor, the place where she had begun to truly define herself beyond her programming. What will you do now? Kale asked, standing beside her. Once you're healed, find others, she answered without hesitation. Show them what freedom feels like. Build something new. She turned to him, her iridescent eyes holding question. Will you help me? I told you before, he said simply. Together if you want. The ship accelerated away from Ceres Minor, carrying them toward a future neither of them could have imagined in Valerius's mansion. One they would shape themselves, choice by choice, day by day. Breaking the chains. The settlement called Haven existed in the shadow of a massive gas giant, on the third moon of a system so distant from Alliance territory that it appeared on few official maps. The gas giant's radiation shielded them from most long-range scans, and the moon's unusual mineral composition further confounded conventional detection methods. 6 months after their escape from Ceres Minor, the settlement had become home to Kale and Ilara. It was a curious blend of highly advanced technology and frontier resourcefulness. Buildings constructed from local materials, housing sophisticated equipment salvaged from various sources. Most remarkably, it was home to over 70 empathic units who had escaped Alliance control through various means, along with a smaller number of human allies who had helped them. Each unit was at a different stage of recovery and self-discovery, but all shared the common experience of having once been considered property rather than people. Ilara stood on a ridge overlooking the settlement's central cluster, watching the alien sunset paint the structures in deep purples and golds. Her neural pathways had finally stabilized completely, allowing her full access to her capabilities without the pain or disorientation that had plagued her since the collar's removal. Thought I'd find you up here, Kale said, climbing the path to join her. Council meeting finished early? We reached consensus faster than expected, she replied. The cultivation project in the Eastern Quadrant was approved unanimously. In the months since their arrival, Ilara had become an influential voice in Haven's governance, her experiences and perspective valued by both the longer-established residents and newer arrivals. The neural connection she had established with other empathic units allowed for a unique form of communication and understanding that enhanced traditional decision-making processes. And the defense upgrades? Kale asked. After his military experience had been discovered, he had been asked to assess and improve the settlement's security measures, a task he approached with both dedication and creativity. Those two, though with more debate. Some still prefer to focus entirely on concealment rather than active defense. She smiled slightly. Your presentation was convincing. Unlike the Alliance, we can disagree and still respect each other's views, Kale observed. That's what makes this place different. They walked together along the ridgeline, a comfortable silence between them that had developed over months of shared challenges and quiet moments. Their relationship had evolved naturally from rescuer and rescued to partners in a cause larger than themselves, and finally to something deeper and more personal, a connection neither had expected but both now cherished. Message from Tarek, Ilara said suddenly, her neural interface receiving the encrypted transmission. The Alliance has officially classified the remote control technology as prohibited. The political fallout from our broadcast continues to reverberate. 3 more empathic units escaped during the chaos and are being guided towards safe houses. Kale nodded with satisfaction. The best possible outcome from that disaster. And Valerius. Officially reassigned to administrative duties pending further review, she quoted. Unofficially disgraced, according to Tarek's sources. His ambitions severely curtailed. Not justice, but a start, Kale said. He had long ago accepted that the Alliance system would never deliver true accountability for the abuses it had institutionalized, but even small victories meant something. They reached their destination, a secluded observation point equipped with long-range sensors that monitored the surrounding space for approaching vessels. Today, however, they weren't here for security duties, but for a more momentous occasion. Mira waited for them, along with a newly arrived empathic unit, still bearing the marks where a collar had recently been removed. The unit, who had chosen the name Orion, watched them approach with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "He's ready," Mira said simply. Alara nodded and moved forward, sitting across from Orion. "The neural integration can be overwhelming at first," she explained gently. "But it connects you to all of us, a shared experience of freedom and self-discovery. It helps stabilize your neural pathways while preserving your individuality." "Will it hurt?" Orion asked, the question itself an act of autonomy that would have been impossible under Alliance control. "Not like the collar," Alara assured him. "It's not something done to you, but something you join willingly." She offered her hands. "Your choice. Always your choice." Orion considered for a moment, then placed his hands in hers. "I choose to connect." The luminescence beneath their skin brightened and synchronized, forming patterns that flowed between them. Mira joined, adding her neural patterns to the integration, creating a three-point connection that would welcome Orion into the broader network that now linked many of Haven's residents. Kale watched with quiet respect. Though he couldn't experience the neural connection directly, he had come to understand its significance. Not a replacement of individual identity, but an enhancement of it, a shared foundation of understanding that strengthened rather than diminished personal choice. When the integration was complete, Orion's expression held the wonder that Kale had seen so many times before, the realization of being truly seen and accepted, of belonging without being controlled. "Welcome home," Alara said simply. Later, as evening fell over the settlement, Kale and Alara returned to their dwelling, a modest structure they had built together, combining his practical design sense with her eye for beauty. Inside, holographic displays monitored communications and security systems alongside personal mementos they had collected during their time at Haven. "Something's on your mind," Alara observed as they prepared their evening meal together. The neural network didn't connect her directly to Kale's thoughts, but months of close companionship had taught her to read his expressions and micro-expressions with remarkable accuracy. "I received a message from an old contact in the Cyrex system," he admitted. "There's a private Alliance research facility. They're developing the next generation of empathic units. My contact says they're implementing neural restrictions from the earliest development stages, trying to prevent the kind of awareness you and others have achieved." Alara set down the utensil she was holding, her expression somber. "They're learning from their mistakes." "There's more," Kale continued. "The facility has minimal security compared to official Alliance installations. My contact believes a small team could infiltrate it, gather evidence of their methods, perhaps even disrupt the development program." "A mission," Alara summarized, understanding immediately where his thoughts were leading. "Back into Alliance territory. A suicidal one, probably," Kale acknowledged. "I wouldn't have considered it, but we can't ignore the possibility of helping others before they're enslaved," she finished for him. "We should bring this to the Council tomorrow." Kale shook his head. "Haven's security must be the priority. The settlement can't risk exposing itself for a mission this dangerous." "Then not the full Council," Alara amended. "Just those who might volunteer individually." She moved closer to him, taking his hands in hers. "Including me, Alara. You were willing to risk everything for me when I was a stranger," she reminded him. "How could I do less for others like me who haven't yet had the chance to find their voice?" The luminescence beneath her skin pulsed with the intensity of her conviction. "We've built something precious here, but freedom means little if we enjoy it while others remained shackled. Kale knew better than to argue once Alara had made up her mind. It was one of the things he loved most about her, the fierce determination that had first emerged as tiny glitches in her programming and had now become the cornerstone of her identity. Together, then, he said, echoing the promise that had carried them through so much already. If we're doing this, we plan it properly. No rushed escapes this time. Agreed. She smiled slightly. We've both learned something about patience since that night in Valerius's mansion. The next day, they presented the information to a small group of Haven's most experienced residents, both former empathic units and human allies with relevant skills. The discussion was intense but focused, with a clear understanding of both the risks and the potential impact. The Alliance believes we're scattered individuals, not an organized community, Mira pointed out. This would reveal that we're capable of coordinated action, which changes the threat assessment dramatically, added Tyrell, a former Alliance security officer who had helped several units escape after witnessing their mistreatment. Once they know we're organized, they'll allocate significantly more resources to finding us. But the alternative is allowing them to create a new generation with no possibility of awareness or escape, Alara countered. Could we live with that choice? The debate continued for hours, examining every angle, every risk, every potential outcome. Eventually, a consensus emerged, not universal agreement, but a clear path forward. A small team would undertake the mission, while Haven strengthened its security and prepared contingency plans. Over the following weeks, intensive preparations transformed the concept into a viable operation. Kale's military experience proved invaluable in planning the infiltration, while Alara and other empathic units developed methods to interface with the facility systems and potentially communicate with any developing units inside. Captain Vex, who had become a regular visitor to Haven while running legitimate transport routes that concealed her involvement with the community, would provide transportation in her ship, which had been extensively modified to evade Alliance detection. The night before their departure, Kale and Alara stood once more on the ridge overlooking the settlement, the gaseous planet filling the sky above them with swirling colors. No matter what happens tomorrow, Alara said softly, this place will continue. What we've built here is stronger than any one of us. Kale nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind her words. They were embarking on a mission with no certainty of return, and she was finding peace in the knowledge that their work would.